Welcome back to Founders in the Field, the show where we go behind the scenes with agency leaders, consultants, and creative founders to show you how they're building, scaling, and staying sane in the trenches. I'm your host, Stephen Bradley, and today's guest is Kevin Drolet, founder and CEO of Climate Hive. How are you doing, Kevin?
I'm doing awesome. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Appreciate you joining me.
Yeah.
Let's dive straight in. For people who don't know your story, take us right back to the start of your journey, what made you start your own business, and give us an overview of what your role looks like today at Climate Hive.
Yeah. So the short story is, in my journey, I worked in nonprofits and worked within communities for probably the first 20 years. Didn't make much money, but got a lot of joy out of doing that. And then got a corporate job because I had to get some insurance and started doing sales. And then did that for quite some time, sales and sort of marketing. And then realized that the company that I was at doing more digital marketing, I felt like there was a lot of basically like dishonesty that was going on in terms of, what we were supposed to tell customers and just giving them reports. And I was uncomfortable with that. So I started a company called See-Through Media with a partner at the time. And, our tagline was, transparency, basically. So bringing transparent solutions. That was my first company. I had a fun and interesting journey and learned a lot from that. Sold that to my partner and then did some training and kind of wandered around trying to figure out, the purpose. Like, why am I here? What am I here to do? And I kept coming back to climate. And so that led me to essentially reaching out on LinkedIn to many, many people and learning what they were doing in climate and just trying to understand the space of how people were taking on the climate, how it related to business development and marketing and what were the different areas. And that took me to becoming a fractional. I started a consulting company and then became a fractional CMO for climate companies and learned a great deal while doing that and just understanding both how the business worked, with the lay of land, what the ecosystems were like. And then that journey sort of took me to a lot of discussions also, one of which I had over Bill Gates' book, How to Solve a Climate Crisis. At the time, that was about close to 4 years ago. And I had that discussion with the co-founder of Climate Hive, one of our co-founders, Mike Higgins, who was also reading the same book. And so we just started to talk about, he's a multi-time founder of companies. And we were talking about, where we thought we could provide value, and, what would be the best thing that we could do. I'll note that I also have a coach, like a personal and business coach. And that was pretty instructive for me in terms of I took some time in a course with my coach, Coach Greg. And basically really try to look at like what I was doing and where I could be effective. And that also shaped coming up with this idea of Climate Hive and coming up with the idea of if we could bring people who had these different skill sets to serve climate startups, that would be amazing because there was a lot of gaps in what they're doing. They didn't, have marketing people. They didn't have, sales development chops or, many were engineers, all kinds of things, just understanding how to grow a business. So Mike and I and a couple other great people, Alex Guinness, and we started Climate Hive, and now we, have been around for a few years, and we essentially, our goal is to de-risk climate innovation for the VC funders, for universities, for accelerators, people that are investing into these companies who want them to be successful, but can't necessarily provide them some of the business development and strategic partnerships from where they are. And we take up that piece of it. And that's the sort of space that we fill up, is to make sure that it's not 9 out of 10 climate companies fail because they don't have the right resources. So that's where we come in, and that's Climate Hive. We tell the company story. We connect that story with the right people and create action on climate, make sure that those companies can do the good work, that they're built to do. So that's how we got here.
Well, Kevin, it kind of, even from when you was in your job that you said they wasn't being very transparent, and then to go into building your, having your own company and having transparency in the name, and then to go into climate, it kind of feels like, ethics is obviously a big pusher for you, and it's something that obviously drives you to be very ethical and to try and make a change. And clearly that's what you're trying to do now with Climate Hive and in the climate space as a whole. So if moving on to the how Climate Hive, how do they actually work with companies? So say if I'm a climate company, what do you actually go in and do for the company?
Yeah, so typically what we'll do is we'll do a 90-day sprint. And in that 90-day sprint, we'll do what's, essentially like a pre-mortems as opposed to a post-mortem where you go like, what do we do wrong? Why do we fail? You do it in the beginning, pre-mortem, and you go, if you're going to fail, where's the place that you're going to fail? So that's one of the things we do and make an assessment of where is the gaps, where are the pain points. And we have a very strong team and people that have a lot of experience in kind of different capacity that makes that really well-rounded. Then during our 90-day period, one of the fundamental things we do is that we build pipeline and pipeline architecture. So we do a lot of outreach to people and cultivate the story of the company, look at how they're telling the story, who they're telling the story to. Does that make sense? Help guide them if they're not, niched on their ideal customer profile, if they're struggling on their go-to-market strategies. We come in and we help shape that. We do a lot of outreach. We bring people, meetings and build also the architecture, like how they can continue on after working with us to do the outreach and continue meeting people. Mainly LinkedIn, email, sort of the standard tools, right? And of course, AI is through everything because it has to be. And then we do a virtual event, typically in our 90-day sprint, where we'll bring people that are interested to an event for that client and then create more pipeline that we'll follow up with. We create content for them that they can repurpose. But we learn a lot about the company and give them a lot of strategic focus too through the course of it. So it's not just business development on the pipeline, building side of things, but it's a lot of where do you need to go, or where do you need to shift, or where you need to pivot, or testing, A/B testing, like, what's the messaging that's working. And the other thing that we do is that we help companies that are outside of the United States that want to come into the United States, or companies that are trying to get into new markets because we have global reach. So we've worked with companies that we've been able to introduce them to Fortune 200 companies inside the United States, or even more specific if there's companies that are like, we want to sit down with this executive decision maker at this particular company. We can facilitate nearly a guaranteed meeting for them because we have some connections there too that we've built a network that people that are actually looking to speak with innovators. And then we have also helped companies find funding and funders and funding strategy. We're not a company that does, we don't take a percentage for the funding or anything like that. We're not built like that, but we get them in front of different parties and stakeholders that are interested in funding their innovation in one capacity or another. So that's, that's the bulk of what we do. And then the other, as part of that, we really improve their optics on LinkedIn, making sure that when somebody goes to look at them, they've got a lot of fresh content, that they're really leveraging that platform in particular to have strong connections and strong visibility.
It sounds like a multifaceted approach, from infrastructure with outreach, but also business development strategy, and then obviously using your network to be able to get them in front of the right people. So what does your role look like in the company as a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, mainly it's like sweating, a lot of sweating and stress and so, I'm trying to help guide a vision. Again, like just coming back, you hit the nail on the head. Like ethics are super important to us. Funny enough, actually, we're launching a campaign with a company called Ethics Merchandise that is a pledge because many people go to expos and events that are in the climate or in the clean tech space or in the green space, but their swag is nothing to do with sustainability. So we're launching a pledge to do like 50%. That's ethics merch. So, but ethics as like for me, waking up every morning, like definitely I want to do the right thing and have a good reason to get up. Yeah, I think I stay awake at night and wake up in the morning, like just thinking how we can do better at helping our clients and the companies we work for. I think that's what drives me. I want them to win because it has impacts on much larger levels for the climate. And it's also when those companies win exponentially, it inspires other people to know that they can do things. So that's really important.
So it sounds like you're less in the delivery of the day to day, but more in the whole business trying to move it forward.
Yeah, I mean, we're a small team. I do, I still make cold calls. I do all kinds of stuff. I'll do whatever I have to do, but yeah, we're small and we're still fairly young, but
Yeah. So now we have a bit of background of Climate Hive, your role in Climate Hive, and your background before then. Let's zoom out a little bit. And what trends are you seeing in the market today?
Well, I mean, so I wrote this piece called Strong Headwinds Make Better Sailors that like I post on LinkedIn. So we had gone to this Green Biz conference. It's part of the Trellis organization as these conferences. There are a lot of chief sustainability officers, the people that are working to try and make their companies more sustainable, hit ESG goals, and working in climate. A lot of passionate people. And in the U.S. in particular, there's headwinds for sure. I mean, there's headwinds, and I think it ripples out also internationally. The part of it is that there's no there's not going to be a green premium. We have to make like this like hashtag I want to promote, but it's not like going very far, but like a cooler world is a cooler world, right? Like, so actually the technology and, taking up things like, getting heat pumps and, reducing methane, finding better ways for people to cook food where, you're dealing with some like emergency brake for the climate type of solutions. Energy, we're obviously in the middle of or at the beginning of a war that has a lot to do with energy, right? It has a lot to do, whatever anybody wants to say. It's, there's a lot of oil and control of oil and these kinds of things going on. So the energy transition, if we can generate energy that's cleaner and cheaper and more effective, right? Like that's what has to happen. And I think there are trends where we're seeing like the price of solar, the price of batteries are coming down. There's some countries that are really leveraging these things. There's still challenges, problems, but we're seeing some changes happen in that space, what people are choosing to use to generate their energy. There's also microgrid development in places like, places on the continent of Africa, right, where they don't have necessarily the same grid infrastructure. They're not developed that way, but they can use microgrids very effectively. And actually microgrids a lot of times can be better because then it's not just like relying on one big grid. If it goes down, millions of people are out of power. You have a bunch of nodes and these, distributed energy where people can have power and then they can control and own that power from the sun falling on them. So there's some really interesting things, going on there as well. I'm a big promoter and of the nonprofit organization projectdrawdown.org. I think they're, what the work that they're doing on climate science is super important. And they have a explorer that they just rolled out last year. It's called projectdrawdown.org/explorer. And there you can actually see like where we need to focus on climate. And they break it down by what's the most important thing we need to do first. Like, food systems, are super important. The question of methane. Methane is a much more powerful greenhouse gas that's affecting the next, 10 years, even, more so than CO2. So we need to sort of also attack the problem at where it's most profound from a time standpoint. So there's a lot going on in climate. I mean, there's a ton of stuff. There's a ton of innovation that's going on. There's people working on the ocean, doing amazing stuff, trying to solve like aviation, concrete, and building materials. A lot of stuff being done with biochar and just how to do carbon sinks, also protecting forests and protecting where carbon gets drawn down in estuaries or bogs or other things like this, making sure that they don't get cut down. Yeah, it's a big question. I don't know to say where the trends are. I feel like I don't encapsulate it all, but
I used to work for a renewable energy company long time ago, cold calling, doing like appointment setting for them, and for like solar panels, insulation, water, heat, air pumps, air-to-air pumps, these types of things. And that was a while ago. And I thought back then, I thought it would have been taken up faster than what it actually has. Like it's taken us a little bit longer to get to be like using renewable energy in the home as fast as I thought it was going to be. To be fair, and that obviously surprises me because, like you said, then there's a war at the minute. There's a lot to do with oil, or that's a big factor in it, or it's a symptom of the war. Do you know what I mean? In the sense of like oil's gone up a lot lately since it, and it's just quite crazy to think that it could effectively all be sort of solved if everybody sort of dived into that renewable space to be able to and innovated, and everybody actually took it up and used it, like for your home, for your car, and for all these different types of things.
Yeah, it's true. And one of the things that is interesting is that there's like innovation is going to look different in 5 years from now. I think we'll see a lot of things like solar panel recycling. We'll see also there's something called perovskite solar, which is basically like a solar ink. And that there are some companies, Tandem PV, that are working very innovatively that will bring that into being in a real way. That will be like a bit of a game changer. There's also solar like being used on like porches, like porch solar. I think that's what they call it, where people that don't own a home, they can put like this solar on their porches and actually get power to their apartments. So there's a lot of there's just a lot of innovation going, like people trying to solve the problem, and I think that will expedite the ability for people to take it up. And the more that people do that, that will shift forward. So it is like I mean the same thing. I'm in California, and you'd think that everybody would have solar, but it's not. Yeah, it'll take still a little time.
Yeah, no, definitely, and it's for it to become a little bit like not fashionable, but the norm to do it. I feel like then everybody won't be like second guessing it as much as well.
Yeah, that's how human behavior works, right? It's like they outlawed plastic bags, and everybody brings their cloth bag. They complained in the beginning, and now they're like, oh, look at my cute cloth bag I bring to the store. It's just part of their style right now. So yeah, once people have that opportunity.
Let's switch gears a little bit. What is working well at Climate Hive, and where do you still feel slight friction?
Well, I think we're having success for our clients, so our sort of system works, and that's very important because you have to have a system that works. And we've been able to accomplish some things I think we're proud of in terms of bringing relationships and building pipeline and helping companies get on the right footing. I don't know, like challenges wise, there's always challenges, but it's how fast. You always want to grow faster, and you always want to take the leaps and stuff like faster. And I've been involved with companies, and I've had, sold companies. And like the way that happens is like you're like faster, faster, and then faster happens. You're like slower. Wait a minute, slower. Wait a minute. So there's a balance there, I think, for anybody that is getting out of the gates, how things develop. So we have pivoted a little bit. Startups typically really struggle with money. So trying to support companies that struggle with money is not always the best, setup, unless you're getting like nonprofit, funding or grant funding or something to support the work you're doing, which we don't do. So we are trying to, target a little bit more and support companies that have portfolio companies where there's a little bit more sustainability financially and helping them. And we've been able to work with accelerators and have some good success doing that. And that's sort of the direction that we're going. So yeah, the challenging part, sometimes is companies run out of money, and they can't pay you for the work that you do. But we're in it for climate, and so we're padding for that.
Yeah, and adjusting your targeting and things like that sort of comes with any sort of business. I feel like you have to adjust, pivot slightly to be able to get to where you want to get and to identify who you want to be in business with long term.
Yeah, 100%. I think the thing that and I create a lot of meetings for people. Meetings are actually easy to come by. And so the question is what's the value of that meeting? You can have a lot of conversations. People are willing to talk to you. But the people that are really going to move things forward are going to be much harder to have a conversation with. And knowing like who you need to talk to is also critically important, because you can have a lot of conversations with people that just aren't going to be, the right fit. And sometimes you have to do that to understand. Like I agree with what you're saying. Like, to understand that, figure out who your ideal customer profile is, what's your strategy for engagement. We're big fans of one-to-one to many strategy where, as opposed to going one at a time, you find levers in society that can open a lot of doors versus just one door, right? And there's all kinds of organizations and associations, et cetera, that can do those kinds of things. But those meetings, the meetings that you have, let's say in a given day, they matter. Who are you talking to? You can talk to, it's kind of like you can talk to a lot of people trying to sell you stuff. But if your job is to sell stuff, as good as that might feel, like you better be talking to people that can buy stuff, on a simple terms, right? You have to have a lot more discussion with people that, financially can help you build.
That kind of leads me nicely on to my next question, which was, what is your client acquisition process? What channels do you use to get clients in? I know obviously you touched on before what you do for your clients to be able to get them meetings. Is that a similar process that you use for yourself?
Yeah, 100%. Like we practice what we preach. We have a very good pipeline building system. It's called Acolyst, that one of our co-founder owns that company. And so, we leverage LinkedIn, email, phone calling. I mean, there's other things, like there's other tricks, I guess you could say, we have up our sleeve to do. But I think like any other, company, I mean, there's on the outreach side of things, social media plays a role. And, you can definitely do engagement from conferences and different things like this. But it's oftentimes, and I've been in the lead generation business for 30 years, it's, if any company, if you ask them, like, what is your cost per lead? What's your cost per acquisition? How much did it cost for you to get that customer? And I think most companies, unfortunately, will struggle to answer that question, to define, like, this is what it cost us to get that customer, right? Because it's a lot of times you're going here and going there and going here and going there, and you're trying 100% of things and only 10% of things really works. So it's figuring that out. But for us, we use the same systems we use for our clients, and they work well.
And are those systems like with your, what did you call it, acronym, the system that you used?
Well, one system we use is called Acolyst.
Acolyst, yeah. So is that AI leverage? So you're able to obviously leverage your time and things like that to be able to outreach people and have conversations where you don't have to necessarily be at the email every time.
Yeah, so it has automation, it has signals. Signals are super important. I think you have to be really specific. I think also, like, people, so it's a question of activity, right? And follow up. So if you're building a pipeline, you have to have consistent activity. And that's where a lot of, companies do struggle. They're like, the activity is scattershot. Or there's somebody running a company and they're relying on a salesperson, and they're just relying on the fact that salesperson is kind of going to do a good job. And so you have to have visibility too, like, is that happening? What's happening? Who are we talking to? And it's easy to have a conversation and say, a report back on, there's this many numbers in our CRM of people that have been, contacted via email, but that doesn't necessarily tell you the deeper stories. So our system gives some insights into that to be able to see that. So, I mean, it's getting harder and harder and harder and harder to get attention. It's just, so you have to be better and better and better at getting attention. And that is really about understanding who you're going after, having a strong value proposition when you get somebody, and making it interesting. Because otherwise, it's,
It's difficult to get their attention.
It is.
So, Kevin, my last couple of questions are, where do you want to be in terms of business in the next 12 to 18 months?
Well, I think I would address it less from, from a business in a weird way, but like address it less from a business standpoint. But I would like us to be able to have impact on companies, whether that's 20, because they vary in size, or they vary in how they're organized, or it's hundreds. But 16 to 18 months, I definitely want Climate Hive to be known as the best resource when you're trying to de-risk a company that you've invested in, and you need them to be successful, particularly in climate. And I want us to be known for that work. Or you're trying to enter a new market, and you need a resource that can help you quickly understand, particularly, let's say, the US. It's a massive place. And companies come to the US and they go like, all right, we're going to go into the US market. And it's like, okay, like California is much different than Texas, and so companies don't know. They don't niche. a lot of times they don't understand how to niche even in this country, like, who they need to talk to. So I definitely want Climate Hive to be known as a company that can support and help those innovators and climate innovators when they want to expand. And then, just I want us to be known as a ethical company that puts climate first. I mean, that's what we're all about. We're about, promoting people that we think are climate doers. We have a podcast called What Do You Solve also. And we talk to global game changers on climate, which is super fun and interesting. So we want to continue to tell those stories, whether we get, we don't get paid for that. But that's part of our climate activism, is to tell the stories and make sure that those stories get out there as much as possible.
It doesn't surprise me with your answer from, speaking to you for the last half an hour, that's where you want to take Climate Hive, but also the reasons why you want to take it there and who you want to serve is very much like embedded in your answer. So I definitely am not surprised in your answer there. Most people would talk about, that I have on the show, have talked about numbers and talked about things like that, but you've obviously gone down, stay true to your why, I'm guessing, and your mission with Climate Hive.
Yeah, because I think if you do it right, the numbers will follow, right? Like the revenue follows, but the revenue follows doing good work.
So Kevin, my last question is, if you could wave a magic wand and fix one thing in your business, what would it be and why?
If I could wave a magic wand and fix one thing, I would just grow faster and attract people that want to be on the mission that we're on. I think that's something that you have to do correctly and organically. So, you kind of can't rush it. And I've done that before. I made that mistake in business before. But, if there's a Climate Hive in, the UK, there's a Climate Hive in Africa, there's Climate Hive in Asia. Wow. We would be able to take that mission to a lot more companies, so that growth allows us to be a lot more impactful. And there's a lot of places where I just want to help. I mean, I want to help those companies in those places where innovation's coming from. In particular, and I'll say this as kind of like closing, but in the global South, there's a lot of different headwinds for companies that are innovating coming out of Africa or India or places in the global South. And there are also people who are first and foremost affected by extreme weather and things, things that are happening in the climate, right? So their innovations actually directly impact in a positive way their communities. So that's something that's also super important to us. And we have a partnership with an organization called Mycelium that's based out of the global South, and they do development work with entrepreneurs. I would love, to see all that grow, because it's good stuff, and there are people doing great stuff, and they're smart, and they're going to change the world.
I think we'll end on that note. Kevin, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your insights into Climate Hive and the reason why you founded it and what your mission is. Where can people who are watching and listening reach out to you or Climate Hive if they're wanting to work with you?
Yeah, super easy. Just email us at hello@climatehive.co. So not com, but co. You can check out our website, climatehive.co, and you can see what we're all about. You can check out our podcast, What Do You Solve? Climate Hive, What Do You Solve? We're on Spotify and YouTube and have a number of shows there. Or find me on LinkedIn. Connect on LinkedIn.
Right, well, again, thank you so much for your time. Everybody that's watching and listening, please like, comment, subscribe, send to a friend. And if you're interested in climate, this is an episode that you want to watch. Thank you so much, Kevin.
I really appreciate you having me on the show.
No problem.